And welcome, I'm Melinda Akinlami. Tonight, Presidential Election Petition Tribunal begins hearing of the petitions filed by the PDP and 3 other parties against the victory of President Muhammadu Buhari in the February presidential poll. Federal High Court sitting in Lagos dismisses a $55 million debt recovery suit filed by the federal government against Agip Oil Company for lack of proof. Federal government files notice of appeal. President Buhari calls for fairness and equity as he inaugurates the board of the Northeast Development Commission for effective rebuilding of the area after years of attacks by insurgents. And South Africans go to the polls to choose new leaders amid complaints of lack of progress 25 years after the restoration of democracy in 1994.
On business news tonight, demand for Nigeria's crude surges at the international market as the United States imposes fresh sanctions on major oil producer Iran.
Tonight, Chelsea head to the Court of Arbitration for Sport after FIFA upheld a 2-window transfer ban against the London club.
And from Abuja, Chief of Defense Staff General Gabriel Olonishakin seeks review of training at all levels of the military and more collaboration among security agencies in the face of current security challenges facing the country.
The Presidential Election Petition Tribunal has commenced hearing in the petitions challenging the victory of President Muhammadu Buhari in the 2019 presidential election today. The People's Democratic Party, PDP, and 3 other political parties are asking the tribunal to nullify the president's victory. In her opening address, the president of the appeal court, Justice Zainab Bukatuwa, explains that the task ahead of the tribunal is a serious national assignment that must be seen as such by all. Our correspondent, Amaka Okafo, has this report.
The premises of the Appeal Court Abuja Division was a beehive of activities as the Presidential Election Tribunal held its inaugural sitting. Aside from the lawyers representing the parties, the vice presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Mr. Pt.1, was present in court. The president of the Court of Appeal, Justice Zainab Bukatuwa, led members of the Presidential Election Tribunal into the court for the formal opening of the special court session.
Election matters
Justice Bukatuwa opened the session with an admonition for the litigants.
These proceedings should be treated as with any other low-profile case, where proceedings in court are not discussed publicly until a decision is pronounced by the court. This admonition is also extended to the parties, their respective counsels, and the members of the press. We, on our part, will make relevant information available as at when due. Any breach will not be condoned, and we will not hesitate in taking necessary action against such offenders.
Aside the case at the Presidential Election Tribunal, the Appeal Court President gave a breakdown of cases that emanated from the 2019 general elections.
So far, we've empaneled 78 panels to cover the election tribunals in all the states of the Federation, excluding Jigawa State, where no election petition has been filed. The panels are now in place and have started hearing the petitions. There are presently 786 petitions, with Imo State having the highest number of 76 petitions, which necessitated the posting of 6 panels to the state.
The tribunal will commence proceedings on a day-to-day basis, starting with the pre-trial hearing of the Hope Democratic Party petition, which is scheduled for May 14th. The PDP case will be heard the next day, May 15th. However, there are no definite dates to hear the petition filed by the Coalition for Change and the People's Democratic Movement for want of diligent filing of their case. Amaka Okafo, Channels Television News.
Staying with legal matters, a federal high court sitting in Lagos has dismissed a $55 million debt recovery suit filed by the federal government of Nigeria against Agip Oil Company Limited. In her judgment, Justice Mojisola Olatoregun held that the federal government failed to furnish the court with sufficient evidence in proof of the case. The suit, which was filed since 2016, is one among several other suits by the federal government seeking to recover almost $12 billion in missing crude oil revenue from some international oil companies. Specifically, the federal government is accusing Agip of underdeclaring the volume of crude oil is shipped out of the country between January 2011 and December 2014. The government claims that Agip shortchanged it to the tune of $55 million. The government also asked the court to compel the oil firm to pay the said sum with an annual interest rate of 21%. Delivering the judgment today, Justice Olatoregun said the issue for determination was whether government succeeded in proving its case to entitle it to a grant of the relief sought, adding that although allegations were made, the federal government failed to establish same. Meanwhile, the federal government has filed a notice of appeal challenging the decision of the High Court, claiming amongst other things that the lower court erred in law when it held that the plaintiff's case fails for lack of proof on a preponderance of evidence. And the Federal High Court in Lagos has also fixed May the 24th to continue proceedings in the suit filed by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission (EFCC), seeking final forfeiture of about $8.4 million and 7.4 billion naira found in some accounts linked to the wife of the former president, Mrs. Patience Jonathan. Justice Olatoregun fixed the date for the continuation of the affidavit evidence after counsel to Mrs. Jonathan, Mr. Michael Zekume, informed the court that he needed time to respond to a counter-affidavit served on him by the EFCC. Counsel to the EFCC, Mr. Rotimi Oyedepo, had earlier told the court that he filed the counter-affidavit, which was served on the defense yesterday. He then expressed his readiness to continue with the case. Though the defense counsel, Mr. Ozekume, confirmed this, he added that there were new and weighty facts in which requires time to read, confirm, and respond to. He therefore sought an adjournment of the case, and other parties in the case had no objection to that request, and the court adjourned till May the 24th for continuation of trial. The EFCC had on April the 20th, 2018, secured an interim order for forfeiture of the sums following a motion ex parte it filed before the court. Moving on to political issues being challenged in the court of law, the Court of Appeal sitting in the nation's capital Abuja will deliver judgment on the dispute arising from the September 2018 governorship elections in Osun State tomorrow. The court has already issued hearing notices for the judgment and had them served on all the parties to the 4 pending appeals relating to the disputed poll. A 5-man panel led by Justice Jumai Sankey had on April the 24th heard 3 appeals and cross-appeal filed in relation to the Osun State governorship election and reserved its judgment. Governor Boyega Oyetola of Osun State, his party, the All Progressives Congress, and the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) are asking the court to overturn the March 22, 2019 majority judgment of the State Governorship Election Petition Tribunal, which nullifies the governor's victory at the September 2018 poll. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission (EFCC) says it has recovered over 1 trillion naira in legal funds and stolen assets in the past 3.5 years. A special assistant to the EFCC chairman, Dr. Enakeno Oju, explains that efforts of the commission has to a large extent reduced the looting of funds by public officers. According to her, the commission has secured the conviction of 2 former governors, amongst others, who are serving jail terms owing to looting and siting of ghost projects. She was speaking at a meeting organized by the Abuja Chamber of Commerce and Industry on dispute resolution. We turn our attention now to the legislature, with the Senate asking the federal government to deploy more coaches to the Abuja-Kaduna rail line to reduce the difficulty experienced by passengers. The lawmakers explained that the rail line is overstretched, as commuters now prefer to travel by rail rather than use the Kaduna-Abuja Expressway, which is now seen as a death trap. Our correspondent Terry Kumi tells us more.
Support Having stepped down all items on the order paper the previous day for a meeting with the Acting Inspector General of Police, it appears that the Senate is in for a busy day.
Shortage in the number of
One of the items on the order paper is a motion calling for more coaches for the Abuja rail line.
the rail transit, that is Abuja, Kaduna, is faced with a shortage in the number of available coaches, which explains the long queues recorded at the station. If you go to this railway station, you don't see the poor there because they cannot afford it. It is therefore important to look at the price so that the poor can afford to use the rails.
The Abuja-Kaduna rail line in recent times has seen more passengers than probably anticipated, owing to the increase in the spate of killings and kidnappings on the Abuja-Kaduna Expressway.
It's not one of the most dangerous roads. It's the most dangerous road in the country today. From the reports that we have received, and from all that everybody is talking about, that road, only somebody who is ready to commit suicide will want to take that road.
While conceding to the prayers of this Senate, of this motion, we vary it to be that it should be to increase the frequency of Kaduna, Abuja, Kaduna rail. There is additional pressure.
The chairman of the Senate Committee on Transport gives an update on efforts being made to improve the train services.
The immediate intervention that the minister has put in place is to look at Warri Itakwe, which does not command too much of patronage, and bring about 2 or 3 coaches, add to that of Kaduna, Abuja. We are expecting additional 12 coaches, passenger coaches, to arrive in the next 8 weeks.
I think it is time that we patronize our local manufacturers and see the possibility of how they can produce coaches.
The Senate will also investigate the fare structure relative to cost to see the possibility of reducing the train fare. While travelers will probably be excited to have more coaches and increasing their frequency, they would hope more for improved safety on the road as a long-term measure to improving transportation along the Abuja-Kaduna axis. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Beyond talking about infrastructure, especially regarding the road and the rail, the Senate also resolved to summon the Minister of Health, Professor Agip Oil, to brief lawmakers on the current state of facilities and healthcare services in the nation's hospitals. This follows a motion sponsored by Senator David Umaru on the alarming report on poor quality of services in the country's teaching hospital contained in the national newspaper. According to the senator, the report showed that most of the teaching hospitals in the country have been overstretched.
The Senate is aware that several stakeholders in the health sector have recently raised alarm on the declining quality of services in Nigerian teaching hospitals amidst cases of overcrowding and lack of adequate funding and personnel necessary for optimal performance. The Senate is concerned that most teaching hospitals in Nigeria have been overstretched, forcing patients to sleep on bare floors, plastic mats, and other unhygienic conditions that put them at the risk of contracting other ailments. The Senate accordingly resolves to 1. Mandate the Senate Committee on Health to conduct an emergency investigative hearing on the state of healthcare services in our teaching hospitals and report back to the Senate within 1 week. 2. Summon the Honorable Minister of Health, Professor Agip Oil, to brief the Senate on the current state of facilities and healthcare services in the Nigerian teaching hospitals. 3. Urge the federal government to adopt a policy on subsidizing the medical expenses of patients with terminal ailments such as cancer and kidney failure. And 4. Urge the federal government to immediately adopt short and long-term measures that will holistically address the challenges confronting our teaching hospitals and retool them for excellent tertiary healthcare services in the country.
In part 2, after the break, House of Representatives to investigate allegations of corruption and embezzlement of funds